Dr. Julian Bashir likes a vodka martini stirred, not shaken. Cheech calls Odo stretch. And Vic Fontaine remembers the Alamo. Well, the movie, that is. Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 15, Badda-Bing, Badda-Bang, written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, directed by Michael Vehar. This was February 24th, 1999. Where were you? We have a very special guest today, showrunner, writer, producer extraordinaire, Ira Steven Behr is here. Thank you so much for playing with us again.
How you doing, Ryan? Cirroc,
awesome.
Hugs and kisses.
Before we get started, we do have a very special thanks to give to Oliver Minal. Oliver, thank you so much for sponsoring this episode. This one is for you. How you guys doing?
Good.
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I got this. I wasn't expecting, I guess I wasn't expecting this episode to be so amazing. And it was such a treat to just watch it. And I think I caught myself rewinding and laughing and rewinding. And I don't know, Ira, you did it again. I particularly like period pieces. And I think you do too. So tell me about how this one came about.
Well, I had been joking about doing a caper show ever since in the year that we had Vic Fontaine on the show. I thought that would be the opportunity, even though we had talked about it, trying to come up with a 24th century caper, but because of the technology, it would be tough to do or too easy to do, actually. So, but this was an opportunity, and I made the writing staff watch Ocean's 11. I remember. Well, we watched it all together, actually, which was just an excuse to watch Ocean's 11. Actually, I knew it would be challenging because of the sets. We had to build, even though it was a 60s casino, which were a lot smaller and a lot less glitzy than Vegas today, obviously. But I knew it was going to be tough. I wanted it, as always with Star Trek, I wanted it to look as good as possible and to have enough extras. It was one of those shows that cost a lot of money. It was really difficult. A difficult show to do, especially doing the caper twice, the one where they're talking about how it's going to go and it goes perfectly. It was a pain for everyone, having to shoot all that two separate times. I know the Lou Race, the AD, it was a much tougher show than people imagine it would be. But, it was also a meta show in that I love the idea of the Trek cast being fans. Trek is all about the fans, the fans who love, Spock and blah, 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 and that fan base. And here are these people doing this ridiculous, absolutely no jeopardy to them. There's no reason whatsoever to do it, except that they're all fanboys and girls and they love Vic and they're doing it for Vic. And fans would do anything for the cast of any cast of Star Trek, of the franchise. So this is the actors of Deep Space Nine, giving the shout out to the fans and being fans themselves.
I hadn't even thought of that. That's interesting. And like all we needed as the viewer is that one line from Vic that said, "It's real to me." And it clicks because we're on the side of the cast, the crew. We're like, oh, what's the big deal? He's a holiday. But when he says it's real to me and Vic is real to us, that's when we go, oh, yeah, this poor guy, he doesn't deserve to be just tossed away because he's a hologram. That's where
you're not erasing my memory.
Renee Echevarria had a very hard time in the writer's room with this one because he kept saying, he's a hologram. He kept saying he had a hard time coming on board. And you need that one. He was the Benjamin Sisko of the writer's room. He was the one saying, what the hell? Why are we doing this?
When are you guys going to go back to work? That was one of my favorite lines Sisko gives. When the hell are you guys going to go back to work?
That was
the way he says that.
He goes, I see. And when are you going back to work? Unflinchingly.
Well, I also thought it was interesting that having Avery be the voice of Doubt really was good because it kept that alive. And so, he was that voice, and then we find out why, which is a different thing. But he was the audience surrogate, for the episode. He's the one voicing all the stuff that a large portion of the audience is thinking, and it gave Penny and the rest of the cast a reason to explain why it was so important to them to do it. So it worked really well.
Yeah, I like the way that it was used as a vehicle to almost it kind of brought Penny a little bit closer, Cassidy closer to Sisko, because they had a little butting of heads argument, which is good for a relationship sometimes to have an understanding like that. It also let Nog we see him now post dealing with his trauma and now saying, hey, wait a minute, this guy saved my ass, I'm going to save his. That it brought that storyline to the forefront. It brought the Odo Kira, them falling in love in his place. It brought all of those memories back to mind. And I love the way the vehicle of saving Vic was just like a perfect way to do it, even though I guess at some point I thought they were risking their own life. It was weird. For a second, I was convinced that the crew was actually risking something, like they could get caught up or beat up or something. O'Brien, funnily at the end when he's like, I don't want to talk about it. Because he, I guess, has to go through that. That's a memory that's not gonna go away for him.
Yeah, that wasn't a hologram for him.
But Ira, this is one thing that I thought you mentioned, that it's about the fans and kind of like an homage to the fans and what they would do for their characters that they love. And this is a microcosm of that in this episode. I also felt a microcosm of the writers paying tribute to the writers. And the way I'll say that is when you talk about Felix writing the Hollow Suite program, then Vic talks about all the backstories. Like when I was 6, the guy, we got in the thing. That's the writers writing backstory, in the show. But it's kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's one of those art imitating life. You're here writing about this programmer who writes backstory for Vic in his life, when you guys are actually writing the backstory for Vic and all the other characters. I love the play, the double entendre there. I think it's another highlight of this episode.
And Felix tossing in a Jack in the Box there, like the writers do. They want to toss something in to throw you a curveball.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't thought about that, and I don't recall Hans and I talking about that, which doesn't mean that we didn't talk about it or talk about it in the writer's room. The memory was of the fans, but yes, I think that's absolutely true, Cirroc. I think it was a little bit, again, it was meta. The whole thing is a story. The whole thing, nothing is at stake. None of the actors are going to get hurt. No matter what we put them through, they're all going to go home at the end of the day. It's all make believe, but we buy into it and we care about it so much. It's so real, and it's a beautiful thing. And for once, I took, when I look back on it, there were 3 ridiculous swings that we took. And of those 3, this is the only one that really worked. Let He Who Is Without Sin was a big swing that was a disaster. And Robert Wolf was begging me to, in the midst of writing it, he said, let's just can this thing. Let's this is never going to work, because we knew for that show to work, it had to be sexy as hell. It really did. That was the whole thing. Riza had to be a truly sensual, sexy place. And there was no way Rick was going to allow that. And he did not. He was very firm about that. And so was the studio. So it made no sense. It was an absolute mistake. The second one, I don't have to tell you, everyone points to it. The idea of making Quark a woman, I still think is a great idea, but it was a miss on so many different levels. We don't need to go into it, but and this was another one, a big swing, a ridiculous thing. Here we are in the last season, do we need to do this? Absolutely not. We're doing all these shows about real issues and serialization and yada, yada, yada. But I wanted to do a show that was a definitive standalone episode that was going to be a palate cleanser, so that when we went into the final 10 episodes or 11 episodes, whatever it is, that it was like the dividing point. So it had to be something that did not, touch any of the stuff we were going to touch later on. It had to be its own thing. And it was like, okay, one more time to be really, really, really stupid and really go for something that's going to probably fail and everyone's going to go blah. And it's like, what the hell? Let's just do it for us, not for the audience. And this time, I think we actually, thank God, pulled it off.
But it was fun, though. And I submit another.
We're all supposed to be fun, Ryan.
Right, but it was
supposed to be fun, Ryan.
It was the lighthearted kind of fun. It's the kind of fun where the audience needs it, whether they realize it or not. You need a break in between heavy. Always, in a movie and in a season. But I also submit that Take Me Out to the Holosuite was a big swing, no pun intended, and that one also hit, and it had a similar vibe in that what did they have to lose? They were all doing this for Sisko, and he had a rivalry too. So I saw a little bit of a connection there with those two episodes.
Yeah, the only thing with Take Me Out to the Holosuite, as I've revealed before, is it's the only time I ever ripped myself off. That show I had written before, which is why I had Ron do it, not me write it again, because that would have been too much. But we did it on freaking Fame. We did a show, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which was the exact same show. We did some of the same gags, not knowing who to tag. I had done it once before, but I thought, let's do it again. Let's come up and see how it works on a. But I didn't want to write it, and yes, they were obviously different things about it, but a lot of the gags, especially the gag where they didn't know who to tag, which of the Vulcans, was actually based on a real story that happened in a minor league game that I had read about years ago, where the minor leagues, really low minor leagues, the two teams barely knew each other, and the catcher wasn't paying attention really who that. So when they realized he hadn't touched home plate, he ran to the dugout and he had no idea who that player was, and he just went down the dugout, tagging someone, looking at the umpire. The umpire said no, tagging no, just went down the hole. Anyway, so yes, I guess that would be a fourth episode, but I knew that episode kind of worked because it was a redo. There was something on
Secrets out. But I actually thought of a different episode. I didn't think of Take Me Out to the Holosuite. I thought more of Far Beyond the Stars because of the period of it, kind of. Also the way I think Nana really shined to me in her performance, because she seemed non-Kira like when she's in that environment wearing her dress. She seems like she's playing the whole doll face era of, talking. And I also feel like what also gave me that impression was the subject matter you brought up with Avery's character, with Sisko.
Exactly. Yeah.
Particularly the thing that bothered him. I didn't realize I hadn't seen Sisko at VIX. And you gave a reason to that. You put some actual backstory to that. And I want to get a little bit, your idea of why that was important to you, or is that something that you picked up from Avery as a human being and then incorporated into Sisko?
Avery mentioned it, if I'm recalling correct. See, the thing about Avery that no one understands is when it came to something like that, when it came to something like at the end of the series about him leaving Jake behind, when there was something that really mattered to him, it was the easiest thing to deal with him. He was so cool, and we'd have discussions. There would be no, it would be a back and forth, and it would be really, a nice working relationship. It was just in day to day when his mood would be, you never could figure it out what was going on, what was eating at him, which is why I'm still so fascinated by him. The most vulnerable man I've ever met in show business. Everyone thinks he was this hard ass, dark, nasty, and I think of him as just this big vulnerable wound, that he was.
Well, I think you write your feelings about him in this scene with Penny when she says, "Just when I think I've got you figured out," and he says it's better that way. Like essentially, like you're not going to ever figure me out.
Yeah, and the fact that he needed Cassidy to get him past what he was feeling shows the difference between Sisko and Picard and Kirk and Janeway and all of them, because he was a much more vulnerable human being. Things bothered him, things affected him and stayed with him, and it was, I think, a very important lesson. Not lesson, that's a horrible word, but it's something to tell the audience about, because I knew growing up myself, I thought of Vegas as a kid, and I had never been to Vegas when I was a child, but I thought of Sammy Davis and Frank Sinatra.
The Rat Pack.
Yeah. So I thought, well, there's no segregation. There's no, everything's cool in Vegas. Hey, Sammy is beloved. And that's totally a lie. That was a total lie. So I think it's important to have brought that out. And it was a very minor conversation with Avery. And I think you're absolutely right. And it's a good point to make. It gave a little bit of flesh onto the bones of the episode, gave it something, to be about something. And also gave Avery a chance to sing, which was something I wanted to do since I saw him.
That's a whole nother. How the hell did you get that done? Because the best is yet to, that was like, I almost had tears in my eyes watching the two of them go and just do that duet. It's
got pipes,
it was like priceless.
Silk.
Both of them. The both of them do. I mean, James Darren as Vic is he looks like he could have been in the Rat Pack himself. He looks like a Dean Martin, or and his voice is that smooth. So just writing this episode, and did you tell him, Avery, are you going to be singing? And he was cool with it.
Oh yeah, before we wrote it, we told him. I wanted to make sure. I just wanted him to know. And the thing is years later, Jimmy told me he was at some convention. I don't know if I've ever told the story. I don't think I told it here for sure. He was at some convention and he was in a coffee shop at the hotel, right? By himself. And it was at night, I believe, sitting there by himself, and Avery walked in. And Avery looked around and saw him. And to Jimmy's surprise, he came over and sat down, and he said for like an hour, it was like the greatest conversation. It was just a beautiful moment between the two of us. And it just surprised him. He loved it, but he didn't understand why. And the reason why was because they had sung together. And I find that when people forget acting, But when two people sing together, and acting when it works is like a song between a duet between two actors. You know, when I did Lucky, the movie with Harry Dean Stanton, you know, Harry Dean didn't have a lot of interaction with people. He was in his own, you know, smoking and you know, he was in 89 and he didn't give a shit. Jimmy came onto the set to do his first night on that shoot. And we were shooting outside in Burbank, on Burbank Boulevard on the street at like midnight. And Harry's sitting there smoking by himself, and they had to do a scene together. And next thing I know, him and Jimmy are sitting there together, and they're kind of singing together because Harry's, you know, was a big performer and sang and played guitar and did club dates and all. Anyway, and from then on, he and Jimmy had a different relationship than Harry and the rest of the cast because they sang together. And that moment where, you know, Avery and Jimmy is singing, the smile on Avery's face. Number one, he knows he's blowing everyone's mind. He knows the fans are sitting there going, "What?"
Yeah.
You know, what the hell? Yeah. You know, I had no idea. Holy, so he just looks so happy, and the thing is, because it worked because Sisko was so hesitant to be a part of it, and then he does become a part of it, and then at the end, it's him. You know, he owns it. You know,
yes, he does.
What a beautiful little through line, separate through line. You know,
and you know,
it's
Cassidy.
Yeah.
And Cassidy gives the reaction that we all gave the second we hear that sound coming out of Avery's mouth. Like, I literally went, "Ooh," and I'm looking at Cassidy doing that exact reaction. I'm like, yes, she is us in this moment while Avery is expecting this reaction. I also think that adding that moment between Avery and Cassidy, where he's talking about the race relations in the 60s, it reminds all of us, like me as just a viewer, that yeah, we think it's all fun and games. We think everything's great. Just because what we're seeing is cool doesn't mean that beneath it, there weren't all these problems. There weren't, and it was such a great reminder because it does kind of snap me back and helps me to realize that it was kind of infused in everything. You know, and you look back at the 60s, you see bubblegum and happiness and silly hair and all that. But really, there were still some really tough times in everything, no matter how happy or cheerful or fun it was. But then to finish off with Avery singing here, it did give Avery's character an arc of, no, I'll never do this thing, it sucks, and this, you know, whatever, and this is why. And then when he's singing, it gave his character that little arc of saying, okay, this guy's not so bad. I'll hang with you guys for a bit, you know.
Yeah, and why, you know, today we have this freaking uproar about having people of color play, you know, hobbits or harfoots or whatever they're called in the Rings of Power. You know, it's like when that stuff goes down, you realize, holy shite, you know, it's still there, it's still happening, it's still a battle that has to be fought every day. And I'm not saying that everyone who's on that side is, you know, a racist, you know, cross-burning, you know, insane bigot. They're not. You know, they don't get it. They don't get it, is a lot of them. They just don't understand, you know, but there is definitely a through line between finding out what Vegas was like in 1962 and that people are all
I've had conversations with or a conversation at least with Avery specifically about this time period and how when he said that Black musicians had to carry like a passport or some type of identification to allow them to even perform in certain places. They weren't allowed to stay at the same hotels, for example, when they were traveling. So there was a big there were a lot of issues there that were being experienced by Black people at that time. So I understand when you write it into that character, it and then forgive it in the way that Cassidy does by saying, "No, you don't have to bring all of that baggage of that time period into this scenario that we're in because this is free from that. This is the program. It's not programmed with that level of bigotry." I think that was also a great thing as far as just a writing tool to be able to say, okay, now he can suspend whatever his feelings are about this kind of a period and become into the character and enjoy himself.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, throughout that time, stretching back, in the 40s, 50s, the 30s as well, one of the few places where, black and white met as equals would be, on the stage, in the band, in the orchestra, in the swing band, musicians were a lot less hung up. They had plenty of things they were hung up about, but they were not hung up about race, most of them, I mean, it's hard to believe now, but, Louis Armstrong, who should know, said way back in the day that Bing Crosby was the coolest white man in America. Now, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, there was nothing cool about Bing Crosby. He was like, as old school and as tight, and all you heard about what a shitty father he was to his kids and this, that, and the other thing. But back in the 30s, in the 20s, and the 30s, he was, the coolest white guy in America. He was a cool jazz singer, and he hung out with all those guys, So that was a place where there was a form of equality, So
we've got to jump to a break very quickly. I do want to remind everybody at home that speaking of Louis Armstrong, I believe in a Next Generation episode, there was somebody that asked Commander Riker if the shuttlecraft USS Armstrong was named after Neil Armstrong, and he said Louis. And I can't remember what episode that was or who he's talking to, but it was just a nice little nod there.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah, it's really cool because it makes us as a fan going, oh yeah, there's more than just space. Actually, there's also and coming from Riker, who is a jazz musician himself. And anyway, so lots more questions, lots more to talk about. This is great stuff. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc, Lofton, and Ira Steven Behr. Very quickly, let's do these trivioids because we've got so much more to talk about. Vic remembers the Alamo, well, the movie that is. Felix likes to sneak a Jack-in-the-Box into his holosuite programs. Cheech thinks Bajor is in Jersey. Let's talk about with Cheech, by the way. That actor feels like I've seen him in 50 things. Esri is a very good waitress. Cheech calls Odo Stretch. Bashir likes a vodka martini stirred, not shaken. And Martok sneaks over to Vegas for a minute. Did you catch that, Cirroc?
Did you catch
as soon as he looked up?
No, that was Galron.
Galron. Yes. Bob O'Reilly. As soon as he looks up, you're like,
you can see his eyes.
That's freaking Bob. And
that was fun.
So well.
Yeah. That was good having him on that
great
show.
Great cameo. Yeah. Man, there's so many things. I don't even know where to start, but I this was the first time we got to see Esri jump in the mix on the shenanigans of the crew. I think she, she's fully vested in this one and really like stands out when she comes with the cocktail dress with the spots coming down. What did you think of her performance in this?
I thought it was fun. I thought we were missing a scene that I wish we had a scene where she volunteered or said, of course I'll do it, or people would have, the other cast members would have thought she hadn't been around long enough to care. And she give her little Vic thing. So that was a little jarring for me. But, what I felt and again, you have to remember, I'm not watching all these episodes, and most of them I haven't seen since 1999. So to suddenly see her, in costume, it was like, oh wow, this is, I forget what episode this was, 18 or something, or no 15. So in 15 episodes, Esri has gotten to the point, that's a hell of a journey. That's what I was thinking when I was watching it. I bought into it, but the other thing I loved was the idea, and I don't know how many people thought about this, but the idea of the whole thing about those two knuckleheads, O'Brien and Bashir, trying to get a hologram to join them in another hologram program.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so ridiculous. And they seemed so hurt that he didn't want to do it. It was just so much fun. At that point, Vic had somehow turned into, one of the, not so much the crew, but one of the station's people.
He's like, I don't look good in coonskin, guys.
Yeah.
Vixen skills like, okay, I gotta look good in my outfits. What do you want me to do?
Well, also, Cirroc, if you'll recall, just a couple episodes ago, they're telling that poor ensign, sorry, ensign, ensign, whatever your name is, you can't join us on the holosuite program, no matter how much he begs. Yet conversely,
Vic,
they're begging Vic, please join our club.
And it's funny because you mentioned it, but we asked Robert Wolf when he was on about where does this Alamo fascination, that's Davy Crockett in Alamo, and he was like, "Oh, that's all Ira."
Yeah.
So you love the story of the Alamo and the history behind that.
Actually, and just before you answer that, Ira, when Vic was describing the movie The Alamo, and he was saying, "Oh, great battle scenes, but this and that," I put in capital letters. I was like, "Is this Ira just reviewing the movie himself and dropping it onto Vic?"
More or less, yes. As a kid, I had a fascination for last stands. I always, people who were fighting a fight that they had no hope of winning, and that was like the Alamo, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Custer's Last Stand. It's overwhelming odds. Zulu. Now the fact is, a lot of the time this is white colonialism against people of color, but it's still the idea of staying and fighting or what. Anyway, that was a fascination. And the other thing that fascinates me is no one knows jack about these stories. The Alamo is a giant question mark. No one survived. As Hans Beimler said, who was born and raised in Mexico. Hans comes from Mexico and lived there for quite a long time, and Spanish was his first language, or as much of a first language for him. He said, well, it's you can't necessarily believe anything that's written from that side either, because Mexicans like to boast about their deeds and like to take credit for things that might not necessarily be true, and so no one knows anything. There's 1,000 books. There are bookshelves sagging under the weight of books written about this, and no one knows anything. So it becomes whatever you want it to be. So obviously, psychologically, for Bashir and O'Brien, who are under such pressure, with the Dominion and this, that, and the other thing, going in against overwhelming odds and either losing or winning, it's a release valve of some kind of weird sort, for them. Also when they were playing we started out when they were playing the Battle of Britain, the flying, they were flyers. And they were talking about, getting shot down. So there was something about that thing, your worst fear is to be killed in combat. And here they're doing it. They're allowing themselves to be killed in combat over and over, I suppose, and maybe that helps them deal with the stress. I do not know. But it was also so clearly something that, was a way for them to be human. It was like so dopey that these two guys loved to go into this place. And look, video games, who knew back in 99 that video games would get more and more sophisticated, more and more popular, killing and being killed. I don't know. I can't explain it.
They also may have an obsession with cosplay because they do like wearing their outfits in the.
So they are LARPing, man. That is LARPing, is what they're doing.
Those guys like cosplaying. That's what it really is.
Yeah, that is absolutely true too. But it keeps them. To me, it made them, extremely human and people under stress who needed to let some of that stress, get out of their system. So why would you want Vic, who is the coolest guy in the world, watching them do this stuff? I mean, you want to do that stuff behind closed doors. You don't want anyone to see you doing this stuff.
Yeah.
They're rolling their 20-sided die.
Yeah, and Vic he's so smooth. He says, you can't fire me. I have a contract. I'm thinking, what the hell? The hologram guy has a contract and he's like about to pull out his paperwork. It's hilarious. Just the way he plays it too. And I think that credit to James Darren as well for just, being the linchpin of keeping all of this together too. He made a lot of these scenes flow. Many times he was surrounded by the cast and he was having to carry certain moments. So, I mean, just a fantastic performance all around, including the guest stars that you cast for this one. I love Frankie Eyes. I thought he's fucking great villain.
Yeah. The face
and
said
Cheech,
it all.
and we've seen Cheech, I don't know, in a million.
In every movie. And same thing with, what was his name? Mark something? I feel like I've seen him.
Star.
Yeah.
Wait. You're talking about the older gentleman?
Yeah.
Well, Mark Lawrence was in Film Noir. He was in Asphalt Jungle. I mean, he was blacklisted. I mean, he was an interesting guy to talk to on the set. I did get down there to talk to him. And Mike Starr, who played Cheech, just was having a hell of a fun time. He was enjoying the hell out of it.
This guy.
Star Trek fan or not, I can't remember. But he was having a really, really good time. And the sweetest guy, just like you'd expect, this big lug, this guy looks like he could break you in half, and he was the sweetest guy.
Yeah, and he got to say the title of the episode. I always love to hear when the title of something is usually in the movie, it's you wait for that moment, but he got a chance to say the title of this episode, and I thought that's a special thing for him as well. Yeah, I love the line Sisko says, "My daddy taught me everything I know." I almost want a T-shirt with. I want a T-shirt with that for Sisko quote.
Yeah,
love the line.
He said it with such.
Yeah, the way he said it. I was just laughing watching this episode. So many good moments. Odo, when he walks in and see the showgirls, and the way his face is like, and the Nas like, I'm gonna leave you alone for a little bit. But you said
that relationship has come a long way. She already knows. And, having my wife there, so she choreographed the stuff on stage with the dancer. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun.
Wow.
Having her there for the show she also choreographed a Voyager. But yeah, she was there on the set, and she loves Jimmy, and knows Jimmy very well. So that just added to the kind of like, the lull before the storm of the final run, the mad dash to the logo.
Well, that's really cool. That I didn't know about that. That's amazing. Also, speaking of Odo, though, we cannot let Renee slip by without mentioning his hilarious fake laugh when he was trying to get along with the other gangsters, when he watched them all laughing, he's just like, ha, 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 we are laughing at something, that cracked me up. I watched it like 5 times. But also the dialogue in this, Ira, I have to ask you, when you basically finished writing this, did you go back and do another pass at all of the dialogue and said, how can we 60s this up just a little bit more? Because it felt like every line had, that lingo slid in there, and it flowed so beautifully. And every line reminds you that you're in the 60s Vegas.
That stuff was a lot easier to write than technobabble. So no, I could have. This episode could have easily been 2 hours long. I could have just riffed. I could have had scenes with Frankie Eyes and Cheech. I could have had scenes with Mr. Zemo and Vic.
The money.
Yeah. So no, that we didn't have to go back and do anything. That stuff was easy.
That's your bread and butter right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could just literally go down the list and praise everybody. I loved Nog's performance in this one. Aaron delivered it. There was a moment there. He threw one line away. It was very casual, his delivery, but he was kind of had his arms folded, and he says, "I wasn't bored, were you?" And he threw it over to Kira. But the way he says it, it was so perfect. It was like it meant something to him, the moment he had with Vic, and he was like, why would you change anything? I wasn't bored with that. And the way he said it, I thought was just, it reflected on all of the stuff he had gone through in the past, and it was very subtle, but it was perfect in the delivery.
You remind me of something, Cirroc, that I just want to say about Aaron. What did the one thing that surprised me about the show, watching it, and really took me, I just hadn't remembered, is that when they do the caper in real time, now what they imagine it's going to be, I was amazed that I started to feel the tension of whether they were going to succeed or not. Ridiculous. But I was starting to get into the discomfort of, wow, this is screwing up. And the guy who really gets to sell that is Aaron, right? Because yes, the glass breaking and all the stuff that happens, but him not being able to do, to get that lock unlocked, getting those tumblers in place, and he didn't overdo it, which I thought was really interesting, that Aaron had really come, because if we had done something like this in the second season, he would have really gone for it in a much bigger, broader way. But here he was much, it's tough with the teeth and all that, but I can use the word subtle because he's not all over the place. And you're really feeling his, like, he knows Odo's watching and Odo's being Odo and getting huffy about it. And I was really impressed by that with Aaron. I thought that was a kid who had really, being on the show all these years, I really saw a growth in him as an actor and as a performer. And, I was right there with him. I was right there with him going, shit. And we did it so many times. I was shocked how many times he failed. It wasn't like once or twice. He kept failing, which was really different. I did not expect that. And I was getting uncomfortable for him. And it's like, come on, kid, you can do it. I was starting to root, but not. It's ridiculous. But I was.
And then I was starting to think in my head, okay, well, how does this turn out if they get caught? Like, I was starting to play out those scenarios in my head, right? Like, what if Frankie walks in on them? What's going to happen now? Is Odo going to have to kill somebody? Like, what's going to happen? Something's going to happen. Then I'm thinking, well, Odo, why don't you just liquefy yourself and get inside the safe or something, or try to do it that way?
I thought of that too.
Yeah, but then I'm thinking, well, how does he get out with the money? So there was a lot of stuff. I'm thinking of all these other ways, and I love the way you started off with the whole drink getting spilled over, because that was like, oh shit! Right away, it was like, plan. This plan's not going to work.
Yeah,
And
I wanted to mention that too.
Yeah,
It was such a great tool to knock us out of our comfort zone, because the
right,
way
right.
they played it out initially, you know, when they're talking it over, we're thinking, oh, foolproof plan, what could go wrong? And then from the very beginning, you're giving us the ups and downs, you know, and that was
Right.
like a little trick, you know. Of course, Bashir fixes it and everything goes right back, but it definitely knocks us off our comfort zone and it sets us up really well. Yeah.
And she failed. You know, the interesting thing is that as Esri is at a loss what to do when that happens. It's Bashir who has to step in, and you're thinking, okay, she's not so good at this. And then later on, when she goes in with O'Reilly, you know, she's the one who convinces him to drink the drink by, you know, when he says no, this time it's up to her to fix it. And she goes, okay, you know, I'm thirsty, let me have it. And just to be he'll drink it himself. So she, you know, rises to the occasion after, you know, fumbling a bit.
I love the way that played out. Man, there's just so much. The lines that O'Brien was delivering were killing me. I was busting out laughing when he says to Cassidy, he's like, "This broad's crazy" or something.
Yeah, no, that was when I had to ask Ira if they did another pass, was because rather than just saying she's crazy, he says she's not dealing with the full deck or something like that. I'm like, this guy just got a million of them.
Yes.
Yeah, no, Brian's killing it.
Yeah, this broad ain't playing with a full deck. That was one of them. Yep. And then he says to her, "You're drunk." The way he said that too, I just busted out laughing. I'm like, oh gosh, this is hilarious. Wonderful job. Even Worf playing the grumpy Worf. I enjoyed his small appearance in this episode. You know, he's just he's a hologram, you know, and
yeah, it was good.
It's just that good voice in the background. What happened to that slot machine? Because, you know, we've had people ask about that slot machine.
I wanted it. My wife wanted it. We asked for it, but, you know, unlike Joe Longo, you know, I mean, there are things that, whatever, but
they're priceless.
I know where they are. Let's just put it that way. But that's one of those things that we did not manage to get, but I loved it. My wife loved it because that was an original one-arm bandit. You know, it was, you forget that they were cowboys, you know, looked like cowboys or gunslingers, the original slot machines. So it was, it would have been a lovely thing. God, she wanted it so bad. She kept saying at the end of "Can't you get it? Can't you get it?" I said, "I am." You know,
you needed an Ocean's 11 heist to pull off.
Yeah, that's what we should have done. That's what we
somebody did walk away with a piece of that episode, and that is a tease for after this segment. Everybody, Melissa Longo could not join us today. She wasn't available with her schedule, but right after this, we do have a segment with Melissa, who recorded something especially for this. But anyway, what were you going to say, Ira?
You know, I just want to give one memory of being on the set that I remember from this show. And I don't want to oversell it because I realized that this show was shot, I believe, over the Christmas. It straddled the Christmas break, right? So I don't know if this scene that I'm about to talk about was before the break or after the break, but it's the scene where everyone's sitting in Vic's and they're talking about the caper, right? They're all sitting around the room. And I was down on the set for that, or for part of it. I came down. I forget why. And I remember standing there and looking around and listening to everyone chatting while they were setting up the lights or doing whatever they were doing, the crew. And I remember thinking, wow, I have not seen this cast, and a lot of them were there in that scene, obviously, look this relaxed. You know, usually you could feel the tension, or you could feel it's just business as usual. You know, we were not, as everyone knows, the Next Generation, ha 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 cast. but everyone was just like sitting there kind of talking, and Jimmy was kind of sitting there, and I thought, I remember having this thought, Jimmy Darren is really good for this cast. I mean, he relaxes people. Jimmy relaxes people. Having him around is a good thing. I remember thinking that. Not that it mattered. The show was over and it was going to be his last, his last stand, really, of a major role. But I thought, wow, this is really cool. Now, it could just be that everyone thought that, it could have been 2 days before the Christmas break. So everyone was happy about that. I'm amending this story because I don't really remember. Or they had just come back from Christmas break and everyone was still feeling, they were on vacation. I don't know. But I had never been on that stage, on those sets, where I felt that, yeah, this is the vibe I often get, on other shows. That I didn't often get on Deep Space Nine. And it was nice, and I at the time I thought it had something to do with Jimmy Darren.
I
Cirroc,
think it does.
I think everybody listening in is like, it's Jimmy, right?
well, Jimmy is one of the kind of coolest, smoothest people you'll ever meet. He's just so laid back, and he's got this softness to his speak, so he doesn't wrestle up any feathers or kind of make anybody feel uncomfortable. He's very soothing, and he's so put together perfectly. He's not a blemish on him. His outfit is like perfectly mint. I mean, that's him as a person outside of the character of Vic. Just when you see him, he's just a mint condition kind of, that has, no creases or wrinkles on the guy. He's a wrinkle-free guy, but he's also got a spirit that's very bright and illuminating. And every time I've been around him, I felt good around him. He puts a smile on people's face. And I think you get a lot of essence of who people are watching this show. You get the essence of who they are coming out of these characters. You see Odo really plays. He's for such a serious, a really amazingly talented actor that we've now heard a lot of praise from guys like Armin and JG, who've told us really the kind of pedestal that Renee comes from and pedigree. But there's also a really good playfulness to his spirit that you see come out in Odo. It creeps out. Like, he can get serious, he can be tough, but he also has this playfulness that he likes to exercise. And Sisko exercises his playfulness in this episode as well, where you see him kind of have that twinkle in his eye and he wants to play. Okay, fine, I'll play. Let's play. And so he decides he wants to play. When Avery decides he wants to play, everybody is having much more fun. The whole room gets a little bit lighter.
Right.
And I think that's what this episode had captured for me, was a playfulness, a togetherness of the cast. And you used the story of the robbery, but really it's about them all kind of having a bond. I like Quark's line when he says something like, "Oh, something's going down in there." Like, Quark can smell something going on. He smells something cooking up. So yeah, it's just like it just shows how well they all know each other effectively. You see them. You mentioned them stepping in for each other. Where Bashir's like, "Okay, I know I need to clean this up because she's panicking." And, everybody kind of knowing, okay, well, Cassidy needs me to play a role. So Sisko comes in and he shows up. Like, everybody's kind of, because they have this chemistry and they have this bond and this relationship in history, they're able to kind of, pick each other up and lift each other up and be there for each other. So I just love this episode. It was just one of the best episodes of the show. It was so fun. I saw that Vic lives in apartment number 107, and I grew up in apartment 107. So
really,
I was like, "Hey, thanks for the shout out."
There you are.
I don't know if I could take responsibility for that one. I should have been, set deck.
Set deck. But I felt like it was it was so smooth to watch, and the performances really great to ride it out on that. Now, when you get do you have to get these clearances for those kinds of songs when you get the best is yet to come? Is it?
Oh yeah, of course.
It's not an easy thing to do, but you get it done.
Well, yeah. I mean, it usually the most important thing was, and we did this from the beginning with His Way. I picked most of the songs, not all the songs, but a lot of the songs that Vic sang over the course of the show. But I never picked anything without consulting Jimmy about it, because I wanted him to feel comfortable that the song was in his range, that he liked the song. So he had to give it the thumbs up. And The Best Is Yet to Come, which was, I think, a song that Jimmy mentioned as a good song for the finale of the show. I thought it was great because we have these 10 episodes coming up, even though we hadn't broken them all, obviously, at that point. But it's like the best is yet to come. It's the end of the series, but the best is yet to come. I thought it was perfect ending for this episode, because if everyone's thinking, why the hell are we watching this episode? The episode anyone was asking for, why are they putting us through this? At the very end, we'll let them know the best is yet to come.
Love it. Everybody, we've got to go to the free-for-all in just a second here. I'm going to read off our very special thanks while I try to recover from calling Bob O'Reilly's character Martok. They're going to let me have it in the comments. Let me tell you, it's because we had JG just last week. Because he played Loss in that great Changeling episode. All right. They are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, Carmen, a.k.a. Skillet, Timothy Baum, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan, Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, John Mann, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anna Post, Rex A. Wood, Anil O. Palat, Erika Stroem, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, DQ, Neal Akasaka, Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, Radek Orszewski out in Poland, Henry Unger, live from Tokyo, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner. A lot of those people you're going to see on the other side. Everybody stick around. We've got Malissa Longo right now with a special segment for us, and then we will hit the free-for-all. So, Ira, this is amazing. We love having you. Thank you so much for sticking around for us. It's like our own Christmas break when you show up. It's the best.
It was fun to be here and fun to talk about the episode with you guys.
Love it. All right, everybody, stick around. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule. As promised, we've got Malissa Longo here. She's got a lot of thoughts on this episode, and they go as follows.
I love this episode. It's actually a favorite of mine because this is a great example of what Deep Space Nine does so well, and that is the use of ensemble, and the use of the ensemble cast in this episode, I think, was on point. And then you add the stylization of an Ocean's 11 themed show episode, and it works for me. And I really like that style of show, and a caper show. And some specifics are, of course, Aaron as Nog, and his time and time again trying to use his lobes as efficiently as possible. And he does have some stellar lobes. I love how everyone has each other's backs when things go awry, and which they do. You have the the idea of what something is going to be like, and then you have the reality of it, of how it turns out, and that's how this episode goes. But this moment here, I think, is my favorite, just because it's so cool. And then the use of the Deep Space Nine theme as a retro 60s type of setting the mood for and tone of this caper they're about to pull off, robbing the casino. And yeah, and I have to mention Avery and his beautiful, beautiful, beautiful singing voice at the end of the episode. Totally amazing. Yeah, and Kira's outfits. Yeah, I would wear all of them. I would wear all of them. And
how about Nog's outfit behind you? Pretty badass, right?
Yeah, actually, 1 second, I have that.
What?
Yeah, 1 second.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, this is what Nog is wearing, his overalls. And I think,
that's amazing. That looks so cool. He got the actual overalls, the actual coveralls.
Yeah, the actual coveralls, and it says Joe on the pocket there. But there's even better, there's still some orange.
Oh my God, that's so cute. It's got some Nog still on that shirt.
It's still got some Nog on the shirt on both sleeves. Whoops. It's
amazing.
Disappearing. Yeah. So it's too short for me, but you know.
Good. Keep it in screen worn condition. What do you think of how everybody else was dressed, like in this picture behind you? Apparently a lot of people loved Ezri's outfit too. And Sisko's looking pretty dapper with the bow tie.
Gosh, yes, I am loving all of them. Ezri's outfit is really cute. It's very cute. And then of course Kira's dress. Odo looks sharp. I love Sisko's bow tie, and he is the commander of all things in this picture. He is far beyond the emissary, far beyond anything, just the coolest cat. I love Cassidy's dress too. It's nice and flowy, kind of Marilyn-esque, Marilyn Monroe-esque. And I love the hats on Bashir and O'Brien. They're pretty cool. This is a cool group of people.
It's an iconic shot.
Yeah. And this reminds me of Ocean's 11.
Totally. Deep Space 8. Deep Space is 8. Well, so that's the outfits. That's Sisko's amazing singing voice. That's Nog, and thank you so much for sharing that awesome piece of history that you have. Any final thoughts on this episode besides those?
I think it doesn't get as much love as it should get. I think it does really well at portraying the time, the history that it's supposed to take place. I love the language that's used in this episode. I love all of the new gangstas that come in, and because they all hit their mark so well. And I love the guy who plays Zemo, because he seems like the old gangsta dude. And where's my money? And the way he says that was a little Brando-esque, but it was wonderful. And I like when Odo is taken by the women on stage who are performing, and Kira's like, okay, I'll let you look, but don't linger too long because we got a job to do. Which is really awesome of her to, let him be who he is, and and enjoy the things that that excitement. He really likes women. it's
Well, changelings are known for their like of women, right?
Maybe. I don't know. They haven't really clarified changeling sexuality.
Yeah, not really.
So
They just like to melt into each other.
This isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah. So overall, I think it's a great episode. And again, the thing that pushes it over the edge is the ensemble and how well they work together. Each one needs each other, and each one has their strengths, and they all shine at one point during this episode. And I love to see that. I love that. And to me, it illustrates what also Deep Space Nine is so good at, is these people are a family, and they've included Vic Fontaine in that family. They've embraced him in that family as well, which is really wonderful to see.
Awesome. Well, that's all great stuff. Thanks, Malissa, for jumping in and doing this impromptu recording with us, since we weren't able to make the schedules align perfectly. So really glad to hear your take on this, since it is a Nog episode and it is an iconic episode with iconic moments. And thanks to everybody at home for watching us. Stick around for the free-for-all, because as you know, that's up next, probably.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say the one thing that was missing in this episode was Jake. Jake would have been a great addition to this episode.
Great point. He would have looked so sharp in a little suit.
Gosh, yes. That would have been amazing.
He was probably busy studying for his SATs or something at the time. Cirroc, that is. Anyway, all right, cool. Thanks very much. And everybody else, stick around for the next thing. Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton, of course.
Hello, hello.
Mr. Ira Steven Behr is sticking around for us because he is the coolest fellow. He's the coolest pally ever, and we appreciate him. Also joining us, we've got on a post here, Carrie Schwent, Eve England, Faith Howell, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, my live from Tokyo in football gear, Dr. Marie Segal, Tierney C. Diekman, Goldu Scott figuring out the iPad logistics, and TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri. So, first things first, on a post, you have so many things to say about this episode. Might as well just hit us with it.
Well, everybody loves playing dress up, so that's fun right off the bat, is seeing everybody just enjoying the holodeck and having a great, Ocean's 11 caper. I actually really, really enjoyed the whole Sisko Cassidy scene where they're talking about why Sisko doesn't go to Vic's, because that was I always kind of had that thing where, like, you see these, I'm like, oh, that'd be cool, but there would never be people like of my color allowed there. And then it's actually addressed specifically word for word in the episode. And I just love that. And like, this is reality. We all have fun, but we also realize that it's not how it was, and the future now is better. And I just loved that was actually specifically addressed, because so often the characters do go into all of these scenarios that, everybody's enjoying and having fun and nobody notices aliens or skin color or anything, but it's never mentioned that this wouldn't necessarily have been okay at that historic time. And then to have everything get pulled off is I just love this episode.
Ira, we did kind of touch on that a couple times. Whose idea was that to kind of insert that scene?
I don't I don't have a clear memory of it, though I would assume that it was something that Avery wanted, you know. But like all the, as I mentioned before, you know, when it came to things like that, it was a lot less dramatic than people may think. I mean, it was the same thing at the end of the series when, you know, he didn't want to leave Jake. It wasn't like, you know, an angry Avery saying it's got to be this way, blah, 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 blah. It was like, hey, you know, how about something like this? How about we just mention this, or just can we mention, you know, that he's not dead? So it made for a great scene. And I think as Cirroc said, what came out of the scene besides the historical facts, I thought it was a great scene between Cassidy and Sisko, because you see that relationship. You know, I mean, they're not getting along, and Sisko is not being, no matter what his feelings are, he's not maybe being as grown up about it as you'd expect him to be. You know, he doesn't want to discuss it, and he's kind of petulant about it, and she just won't take the shit from him and gets him to talk. And so it's a lovely scene, and it says something, you know, important to say, as we were saying, especially when you're seeing today what's going on with you know, this Lords of the Ring, or whatever the hell it's called, Rings of Power, and all the ridiculous things that people are saying about that show. So I just think it gave the episode an interesting and important point of view, and it helped that at the end, when Avery is singing, which is such a great moment, and a surprise for the audience, especially at that time. I mean, no one was thinking of Sisko as, you know, unless they had seen Avery and Paula Robeson his one-man show, which I had done, which is why I wanted to see Avery sing so bad on the show. So, but yeah, I mean, look, I have very mixed feelings about Vegas. You know, my folks lived in Vegas for 10 years. And my dad was a gambler. And I remember, and my kids grew up going to Vegas 4 times a year, it seemed. But I remember, you know, guys in a guy in a suit, you know, we'd be driving in and he'd be standing on the side of the road with a sign saying, you know, going to wherever, lost all my money. And it wasn't a joke. You know, it was not a joke. He had a suitcase, unless he was a really evolved serial killer, which could be. But you know, otherwise, you know, Vegas is there's a lot to unpack when you start talking about the real Las Vegas. So to keep some of that in the show, I thought was important, and at the same time, still having some of the glitz and fun of it.
So TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, you just put something in our group chat here that I don't understand. So what better time to call on you to tell us what you think of this episode, and also what the heck does that mean?
That was Avery is what I was saying as a response to probably who
got it.
The idea was to put some historical context in this episode. And that was a big takeaway for me from this episode also, because I mean, we have Far Beyond the Stars, and we've had him, you know, have his, you know, African things that he hangs around in his quarters that he brought from Earth. And, you know, we've seen how he dresses in some episodes when he's not in uniform. And, you know, so this was really a great, you know, follow along to who this character is, Captain Sisko. And I really appreciated that it wasn't just a throwaway line, like they had a full conversation, about this subject. And it was also, a great follow up to their relationship, because we've also seen another scene where Cassidy had to draw some stuff out of him and take me out to the hollow suite to figure out what's really going on in this situation and why does this bug you so much. And then she does her thing. She does her work to just kind of neutralize, whatever is going on with him, and kind of get him to see a little bit more clearly. So we got to see another scene of Cassidy doing her thing, and that was great. It was great, just to see, the team get together and hatch out this plan. I'm imagining, what if, like, all of us, some of us just came from Vegas.
Oh no.
We had to put our heads together and come up with some grand master plan, like this. Like, that is, what they did was not a small thing. They knocked off a casino in Vegas.
Let's try.
No, I'm not going to try, because I'm going to go to jail, or worse.
Yeah, I was going to say that'd be the easiest.
You're lucky if you go to jail.
Yeah. So yeah, great episode. I love it. I love that DS9 is not afraid to address these issues. And the funny thing is, when I was younger, it didn't hit me as hard as it does now, because a lot of these issues, that we think were gone away are front and center with us today. So, I appreciate that our show, our favorite show, when it was on the air, was front and center on these issues that are still in front of us. That's what I got to say about this one. Thank you, Ira.
Yeah, TJ, you bring up an interesting point that, I don't think gets enough notice, which is just how interesting. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I worked on it, so I don't want to. But the Cassidy Sisko relationship, is a great relationship, and it was, you could say, well, the show didn't need it necessarily. No other captain had a ongoing relationship with a guest character or a recurring character to that extent. But I mean, it checks so many boxes that makes the show better. It makes Sisko's character much more multidimensional, and it was someone who was not in Starfleet or not a military person, who was still a very strong woman at the time, was not that evident in the television landscape. And I just thought that beyond all that, just the relationship itself, how they dealt with each other and with Jake, as a matter of fact, it was just a really loving relationship without a lot of touchy-feely. There weren't sex scenes to say these two people loved each other, but you could just feel it. And it's a part of the show that I think really helped raise the bar of the show, and which is why I adore Penny Johnson as much as I do.
Yeah. Sisko needed it, I thought, as a character, and as a person. I feel like Sisko needed it, and to a lesser degree, Jake needed it. And that's what made it so beautiful for me to see. However, if there were a Vegas heist, she already outed herself. We know who would be leading the charge. It would be Sue. Sue would be the one being like, all right, you distract the... what do you think of this episode? Did you love it?
Yes, absolutely. There's too many things to list. I'll keep it short. The only thing that I didn't like was that Cirroc didn't have a part in this. I kind of understand it, but Avery singing with Vic, that was just, that was unbelievable. The lighting, the costumes, everything was absolutely every detail as usual. There is no higher bar than shows like this. Just fabulous. I could watch that show 100 times in a row and never get tired of it.
Sounds like a dare.
Yeah, really.
Awesome. What about you, Faith? How are you? It's good to see you.
Doing well. So 10 out of 10 for me for this one. For me, this episode, I know the ones where they're out of costume are easy to call like throwaway episodes, and they're not Trek or whatever, however, the naysayers want to call them. But for me, this ticks all the boxes of quintessential Trek. We've got, yes, they're out of uniform, which is one of my favorite things, contrary to popular belief. Their Starfleet teamwork shines in this episode. Like, what better team to have a heist with than your coworkers that work so well together and in war times and good times. So that box, boom. It addressed the social injustice, which is something that I know modern Trek is kind of trying to get back to, but for a while we lost in the middle. It got to be too far into the Kirk sexy angle and not the sci-fi commentary on society angle. And so I like that was included. And it was just plain simple fun. It was great to see our characters interacting in an unconventional way, and something that was light and successful by the end of the episode. I really enjoyed this one.
If you like characters out of uniform, you will also love TNG's Cupid and Captain's Holiday, also written by Mr. Ira Steven Behr, two favorites. Eve England out in Wales. Now, I was going to ask you what you thought of the Captain's Holiday, but we'll save that for another time. How do you feel about this episode?
Yeah, it's the same with everyone else has said. So I'll pick up a couple of things that were just really interesting from the companion. When I first watched it yesterday, I thought I really recognized that the accounts guy, and I couldn't really place him. And then I read the companion afterwards, and then I was like, oh my goodness, that is such a clever thing. Yeah. And it says about how it was Bob's idea of a joke because his obviously Robert O'Reilly is his stage name, and his childhood name was actually Bobby Riley, and back in 1962. And I thought, oh, that's just so clever. And it's obviously the second time we've actually had the two Klingons out of Klingon makeup, which was really cool. Actually, I was wearing my Ferengi eyes today because I thought it was sort of a good sort of play on the Frankie eyes.
Very
trying to work out what to wear today.
So everybody listening in, Eve is wearing the Seventh Rule Ferengi Eyes shirt, and I did not make that connection. Very good, Eve. Frankie Eyes.
And one thing that did shock me actually is I'd completely forgotten that this was one of the forgotten O'Brien Must Suffer episodes. I'd completely forgotten about what happens to him, and that just cracked me up at the end. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. But as we've got Ira on the call, I thought I loved the way how they juxtaposed, the casino with Vic and the sort of swing music and how sophisticated it was, and then you had the sort of exotic dancers then to represent the sort of the alternate casino. And obviously, it must have been really, really fun having Laura working with you on this again, Ira.
Yeah, that was good times. She's she loves Jimmy. And the idea of being on the show with Jimmy there. I mean, he does tend to get people in his orbit one way or the other, and just having her, I mean, this was, as I was saying earlier today, this was a much more difficult episode than the audience probably realized. I mean, it was a really, not just the sets, because I gave them a hard time with the sets because I wanted to have some kind of scope and some largeness, and I wanted it to look like a 1962 casino and not a 1999 casino, which very different things. And then the whole having to go through the heist 2 different times, shooting it 2 different times was a pain in the butt to the crew. But the audience doesn't know that. It's not a big action thing. There's not tons of extras and there's not tons of people in makeup, but it was a really tough episode. So to have dancing in it and to know that part of it would be handled, I wouldn't have to worry about it. My wife would get the dancers and would know most of the dancers ahead of time. You were the choreographer, don't you remember?
There she is.
Badda-Bing. Badda-Bing. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. It was fun, but it also took a pressure away that would have been there if we would have had to hire someone and then worry how they would fit in as the choreographer. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Ira, next time Laura pops in, can you tell her how much we love her and appreciate her work?
I will.
I also saw a cute little dog running back there too.
A cat.
Maybe it was a cat. I just saw a tail. Squirrel, I don't know.
We have plenty of squirrels, I'll tell you that. They eat every goddamn thing.
There's somebody amongst us that loves to feed the squirrels, and that is Carrie Schwent. How are you, Carrie? What do you think of this episode?
It's absolutely one of my favorites of probably all 7 seasons. I love all the Ocean's 11 movies, so I immediately yes, I love this one. The hair and the wardrobe is just gorgeous. Kira's dresses and hair alone are just, that red dress is stunning.
Killer.
And her and Odo walking in and him seeing the dancers and him going, and Kira just laughing her butt off. She's like, yeah, okay, you stay here and enjoy this. I'm gonna go over here.
Yeah.
And my haiku for this one just was super easy. I got it in 2 minutes. There we go. Yeah. Trouble at Vic's place. Time to rob the casino. Goodbye, Frankie eyes.
Pretty good.
So much fun. And I do have a small nitpick. We covered the Jake thing already, and I do have Grumpy Bear this time, so here he is. And he says a few drops. That was a lot more than a few drops. Squirted into that
was
drink.
A squirt.
Yeah, that was a lot more than a few drops.
Got to make sure it works.
I love that we brought back Ipecac, right? Didn't we in another episode? We talked about Ipecac, which is from some W.C. Fields movie. Where I first heard, I just love that word, Ipecac. It's sounds like the worst medicine you can possibly do as a person. It must have been.
Anne of Green Gables, Ipecac and expectorant.
Yeah.
12's the coup.
Oh,
Ipecac.
Good knowledge. Good knowledge.
Mm-hmm. All right, if somebody knows what episode that came from, it's got to be Marie Segal.
I actually can't remember.
Then it's nobody.
But it's so amazing.
How much do you love this episode from the perspective of a doctor?
I mean, I just love it. The music is perfect. The Sisko relationship, like everybody talked about, sorry, they just make each other so much, together, they're so much stronger. And I love that you never have to see the sex scenes to get ratings, on Enterprise with the decontamination chambers that were super awkward to watch. So it stays being a show you can watch with your family and not feel awkward. And it's just, that relationship is so beautiful. And you know that Cassidy and Ben care about each other so much. And, almost in the way that those scenes with Picard and Vosh in Captain's Holiday, you kind of get that softer side of Picard, but obviously in Deep Space Nine, it's so much more because it's a very, a serious relationship. And then, that I love that footsie comes from this episode since Memory Alpha added a footsie article, which is hilarious. So I love it. Check it out.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Memory Alpha, I looked on Memory Alpha. I can't find the Hippocap yet, but we'll find it.
Hippocac.
Hippocap.
Yeah. I just think it's so funny that we're sitting here and you're asking people, do they love this episode? Because at the time we did this was not a beloved episode by any means. It was another one of those, what the hell are you guys doing? Now it's the end of the series and you're taking time out of the last, dozen or so episodes to do something this silly. I mean, it's really, it blows my mind that people are sitting here going, yeah, favorite, love it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what a difference. Time, man, it changes everything.
That's DS9 age as well.
Yeah, age is the best. My live from Tokyo is calling in from Tokyo. It's like 7 or 8 for you right now, isn't it?
7:20. It is indeed.
Thank you for waking up early for us in football. How are you today?
Amazing.
And is this your
I'm
favorite
good.
episode ever, by the way?
It's one of. It's one of. I like this. I think that of all the shows, of all the Star Trek shows, DS9 is unique in telling this continuing story. And that serialized nature of it makes this episode stand out as like a breath of fresh air. It's that feeling of a weekend that's separate from the weekdays, or recess separate from the classroom. It's a bit of theatrical fun that tickles us, and it's a treat to enjoy, to be honest. I love that. I can only imagine the actors were having a lot of fun doing it also. So that was cool. Last week, Homer talked about motifs with the hands, and I thought that triggered me. That's really interesting. So this week I was watching that closely, and I think that what I noticed a lot on this one was a lot of focus, close-up focus on facial expressions. Early on, Cassidy and Sisko talking over dinner, the beaten Vic at his door when he meets Miles and Julian. Kira telling Odo to enjoy himself when he turns around a few seconds later with his reply, and on and on. There were a lot of close-ups on the face, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't thought about it until Homer said that last week, and so that came to me to this week. On messages, I think the discussion between Cassidy and Sisko regarding the reason for his not wanting to be involved with the Holosuite program was important. I don't think I agree with Cassidy, and I find myself very much in agreement with Sisko on this. Despite where we are now, we must always recall where we were, and we have to continue to learn from it, to develop an understanding that the status quo it's an earned right. It's not something that just happened. I think back to a time when I lived in Germany in university, and I was told by a local classmate that the annual celebration of Kristallnacht should be set aside. It's become irrelevant today. Being Jewish, I disagreed then with that idea about stopping the Kristallnacht remembrances, and I find myself similarly siding with Sisko on this point. But as I said at the beginning, this episode to me, it's all about the entertainment value. It's a chance to have some fun on the set, and that was my biggest takeaway this week, honestly.
Nice. Very good stuff. I'm only sad that our buddy Mike Goo isn't here to see his last name on your shoulder, on your clavicle there. Still holding out hope he'll show up late.
Yeah,
Tierney
I have a
C.
nitpick. I have one
so
little
sorry,
nitpick.
Tierney. 1 second. Yes.
My nitpick is that a full house got thrown down, got full.
Right?
You took one for the team. That's it.
Yeah.
I also liked it when
Easy.
Sisko was making it rain. We didn't talk about that. And that one lady was going like, that was brilliant.
I love
Loved it.
her.
Yeah. Tierney, how are you? Did you love her, and did you love this episode?
Wait, her? Who's
The lady that was with the big bad with that when it was making it rain? She was. Never mind. How much did you enjoy this episode?
Well, actually, to touch on that, if I only have a couple of actual nitpicks as far as the episode, but one of them is why Sisko, and I think it's actually touched upon somewhere in reading, that he's got a pack of cash as opposed to only having chips on him in the casino. And I would just love to see him just pelting everybody with handfuls of chips. and to see where that would go instead of the cash. That would have been great. But of course I love this episode. And Faith touched on it, as I have many times with these more inventive things, that this is quintessential Trek. It is the definition of science fiction and beloved characters where we can take them out of the context of what we know of them, because we know them this well, and we can do these crazy things with them because of that, and love it just as much and include it just as equally as any other thing, including their ongoing story. So yes, it is the thing. I mean, I know we say it a lot, that it's a fun episode, but this is kind of the definition of a fun episode for me. And that's, I don't use the word fun lightly, unless I'm using it satirically, but it definitely works for this one. And pointing out nitpicks is almost like trying to find imperfections in a classical masterpiece. Oh, they didn't have boats that had this kind of thing. You can find them, but upon watching initially, they don't distract from the enjoyment unless you're allowing them to do so, if you're that kind of jerk, which, I mean, enough of us are. But I didn't go back and look at the companion information until after I had watched it a few times and written up notes or anything. So it actually kind of answered some of my own questions to it, as everyone else. But of course, when it came down to the reason why Avery doesn't want to visit Vix, and I've just did that by Avery as opposed to Sisko. And in the companion, it notes, Ira, that you wanted to draw in the people that, while watching Trek at the time, would go, what the hell is this? Like, what are they doing? And then have him as your skeptic. And once the captain joins on, who's already such a strong personality, it draws them in. And that's a pretty good reason for it. And it makes sense. And you've also got your message there. But looking back at it, the first watch, strong watch through yonder years back, and I'm looking at it as relating to modern era at the time. And I'm thinking, is this something that the writers wanted, that Avery wanted? Because this is done, 90s, early thousands, and we don't want ever to forget this. Holy crap. We can't. I mean, look up COINTELPRO if you don't know what it is, between the 50s and 70s or so. Things that the FBI was doing that involved a lot of people that Jimmy Darren might even know in show business. And it makes sense. It does. And at the same time, you're going, but Starfleet Federation, and in relation to visiting a holosuite program, and yeah, it's been washed out of the code. It's been photoshopped and written out of the holosuite. But is it really worth it? It seemed confusing. And then later on, going back and watching through it, there's the context of the character of Sisko himself. And that scene, Cassidy and he at dinner, and why have you never been to Vix? And out loud, the last wash through, I go, because trauma, because he's Benny Russell and they beat the hell out of him. And that, again, was the 50s as opposed to this being the 60s. But again, look up COINTELPRO. There was not a lot of social growth during that time, and there still isn't today. So yeah, it definitely makes sense. And he does obviously come around, and we need him, and it brings the audience in, and you go, yeah, Sisko. I don't know how you heard that they needed a high roller on the other side of Vic's door all the way down the hallway, but you came in at just the right moment, and it's beautiful. But besides that, most everybody else has got over anything else I had as far as that. But the great moments there, one being just the growing relationships between the characters. Ezri is well established now as part of the crew. And Kira and Odo walk in. It's got to be my favorite moment, and he's just mouth agape at these beautiful burlesque showgirls. And even though she's gorgeous in her Lola dress, she's phenomenal. That is such a strong, I don't know about anybody else, their relationship, but it feels a very real moment to me of relationship strength, of you stay here, go have fun, enjoy this. And Odo growing as a person, no embarrassment, no second thoughts, just saunters off and does their thing. Kira using her espionage kind of skills to lure in Frankie Eyes, things that she knew possibly from her rebellion days, and that's actually noted in the companion, which made me really happy. It's like, oh, I thought of something that they mentioned, and other bits there, and the campy moments. Friggin' Robert O'Reilly with, it's the saddest story I ever heard, and you've got some great bits there, and I think it's Michael Starr who plays Cheech.
Mike Starr, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he's played your great value brand Goodfella in lots of things throughout the years. I don't think the man has even aged. Like, he still looks the same, and he still plays the same gangster. He's his own Q across the universe of television. He's fantastic in that. And I could be wrong, but I swear he says friggin' at one point in relation to possibly the cheesesteak that he's gonna shove in the guy's face. And I think that might be the only mention of friggin' in any Star Trek episode, unless I'm missing one, at least up until that point, which makes me very happy as someone who swears very frequently. And of course the girl with Zemo, I know you, and Zemo is great. Mark Lawrence. Yeah, and bringing him in after being blacklisted in Hollywood, and him coming back as he's this frail old man who's gonna rip out your friggin' heart. It's wonderful. I had some nitpicks, but I don't think any of them were any good, except for I would have liked one scene to see how they got that giant safe frame and the door into that room. I would assume just replication and then transportation, but I always imagine them trying to pull it out of the room replicator where they get their coffee, Ractigino and a safe lock, and assembling it in there. And then something definitely to your wife, the choreography. I love the dancers. As a choreographer, it made me very happy and a little bit sad that I didn't get to see the rest of them. And it makes me want to chair dance. So
chair dance, nice.
Very nice. And I don't know if anybody noticed it, but at the end, when they're walking Frankie Eyes out with that great moment, I don't know if we brought O'Brien in from a suffering strip search. Thank you for bringing that up, Eve. I would never have counted that as an O'Brien must suffer episode, but yeah, you're right. Ooh, it was suffered terribly. But the girls go with the pistol motion as they're bringing Frankie out the door for a ride into the woods, and it just falls right with the crash in the music and the altered DS9 theme. And yeah, all around you can see all the work that goes into it, and very, very wonderful, very, very wonderful. And of course, Avery singing. Holy crap!
Yeah.
Cirroc, if you can't get Avery back into acting, can you get him to sing?
Yes, sign him up on Cameo. I will take whatever he wants to sing me a lullaby.
If Brent Spiner can do an album called Old Yellow Eyes is back in town.
Well, Avery did do an album. It's called Here, and it's actually an abbreviation. It's kind of a play on Paul Robeson's autobiography called Here I Stand. But yeah, he does have an album that he recorded. I don't know if we ever got our hands on it, but I do have it. It was great to hear his voice. I have a question for Ira. Is Odo indicative of what most people look like from Jersey in the 1960s?
Obviously.
He's in better shape than most people.
Yeah, okay.
In the 1960s. I'll tell you that. Leaner and meaner. Let's leave it at that.
All right, everybody. We all know the elephant in the room is that the character of Cheech was obviously based off of Guldu Scott Jensen here. He is our Cheech, and he's here to tell us
100%.
his thoughts on this episode.
I'll be your Cheech, Ryan. That's totally good by me. So much fun, like a bottle episode, like everybody was saying. But my favorite things that I take out of it is that Vic is from South Philly, and he played stickball as a kid. I would love to see that spinoff for that prequel. Vic playing stickball with little Frankie eyes over there. Having grown up on Long Island, a lot of this hits home too, because it sounds like the entire Sicilian side of my family and every single family get together. Absolutely wonderful. And something else that is indicative of being born and raised in that area is I noticed saxophones. And there's one point in the very beginning where Frankie first comes in here, it's curtains for you. And they're playing, it switches over to the band and the girls dancing. And there's a saxophone song playing. I'm like, where do I hear this? I remember this from something. And the only other place that I recalled that I heard it from was in Back to the Future.
Yeah, exactly. At that wholesome high school dance.
In the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, it was Marvin Berry and the Starlighters.
Oh, right.
And I'm hearing that. I'm like, wait a second. And I thought that it was kind of cool that this is kind of a time travel episode in a way, spiritually, not necessarily actually. So it tied that together for me, and it was crazy because God knows how many times I've seen this episode, and the fact that was the first time I caught that this morning pre-coffee while I was watching it. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But I love that. I'm not very much a huge fan of a lot of the holodeck episodes across other Star Trek because it feels like it's, oh no, the security locks are broken and the whole ship is going to be destroyed by some computer program. And I love that. And you're worried about the crew, and you're worried about, oh no, is the Enterprise going to get blown up by some, evil genius or whatever, or and stuff along those lines, or is Beowulf going to kill everybody? But in this, we're worried about a computer program. I'm not worried about that Enterprise. There he goes right there. I'm not worried about DS9 blowing up. I'm worried about Vic, and this is like his fourth episode that he was in there. So it shows how much fourth or fifth, how much charisma that he literally of a 1960s movie star that this man had, that he would just make us love him just that quickly. Mm-hmm. And I would have been in there. I feel like I would have been the person that had O'Brien's part in the entire heist. Like, hey, he stole something. Get him. I'm trying to see where I would fit in. And I'm 100% the patsy. I'm the patsy. So hey, I'll take Frankie. That's a step up. As long as I'm not little Paulie.
Yeah. Don't be little Paulie.
Wow. Too many Paulies in this business.
Good knowledge. So we do have to run, everybody. Cirroc, any final thoughts from you? And Ira, my goodness, this has been such a delight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule for us and making us feel special and sharing your thoughts and memories.
Well, it's a nice. It was a nice episode to revisit. It was a lot of fun for me to see it again and to talk about it.
Yeah, what I think was done well is specifically, it's a throwaway. It's not a throwaway, but it's a small addition to the whole puzzle. But that line with Sisko and the reason why he doesn't want to go into Vix, that is indicative of it's a nugget there that makes it so much bigger. It also addresses something for me, which is what Star Trek is really mostly about, and that is that everybody has can find a story for themselves in it, or find a place where they belong in it, and to address those kinds of things where I don't feel like I belong, which is what Sisko is saying essentially. I don't feel like I belong in a place that treats people like this. It's a testament to you acknowledging that, Ira, and the rest of the writers, for you guys acknowledging that, that sense of belonging. And we've watched these episodes talking about, for example, the last episode we reviewed, all of us walked away feeling a little bit different. Like those of us that saw it from, a Black experience in America. Some people saw it from an immigrant experience, and some people saw it from a trans experience. And so the way that all of us can receive some information or get some nugget of truth that we can hold on to is a testament to the quality and time that you put into thinking out these stories, Ira. And that's why I want to say thank you for just doing that for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's nice to know we weren't wasting our time for those years. Who knew?
Yeah. And I expect in another 25 years, people will have even more scintillating words about this, because Deep Space Nine just keeps aging better and better.
Like fine wine.
Yep. So thank you, Anna, Carrie, Eve, Faith, Sue, Mai, Anne Marie, Tierney, Scott, and TJ for sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate it. And for Ira Steven Behr, myself, Cirroc Lofton, for Joe, that's Aaron Eisenberg. That's the little thing that he had on his maintenance suit.
I got one thing.
Let's hear it
really, really fast to hold myself accountable. Okay, so either or both on the cruise or next year's Vegas, I will dye my goatee purple.
Nice. All right.
We have
there
in honor of.
Be my guest.
There it is.
Now I have to do it. I thought it. Now I have to do it.
All right, everybody. You heard it.
I do have one more thing. One last thing. Sorry. The guy who was security that Cassidy and O'Brien were trying to distract was wearing a name tag that said Ryan. So Ryan, you two were in this episode.
Did he really? I didn't even notice that.
Yes,
that guy's my new favorite character, and I didn't even know it. What a guy! What a guy!
Football players, yeah. 2 linebackers.
Easily fooled, man by my own heart, right there. All right, thank you all very much. We will all see you next time, and until then, always remember the 7th rule.